Chapter 13. Lori makes trouble and Joe makes peace. I think you have read this chapter, so it means you are ready. Let's begin. Lori understood Joe was keeping a secret, but he guessed it was about Meg and Mr. Brooke. Joe was keeping a secret, and she refused to tell him. It was special because. So he understood it was Meg and Mr. Brooke. He wished his tutor had told him about it before, but he hadn't said anything. He began to make a private plan of his own. He thought that everyone would see. Let's see, what would he do? Some changes happened to Meg, and there was a worried look on her face. Then a letter arrived, and Meg stared at Joe with a frightened face. Meg supposed that Joe and Lori wrote a letter to herself on behalf of Mr. Brooke. She got very angry because in the letter it was written like that: "My dearest Meg, I can no longer hide my love for you, and I must know your answer before I return. I cannot tell your parents yet," like that. The first letter contained information like that. And Meg supposed that Mr. Brooke wrote it, and also she replied it. But in fact, it was written by another person. And after that, second letter arrived. At this time, Meg stared at Joe with a frightened face, because in the second letter, she understood that he hadn't written before any letters, any love letters. Okay. Meg supposed that Joe and Lori wrote a letter to herself on behalf of Mr. Brooke. Joe refused to have sent it. After seeing the letter, she guessed Lori had done it because Lori had said that you would see. He had a plan. Mrs. March wanted to be sure, and Meg told everything from the beginning. At first, the first letter, which was written on behalf of Mr. Brooke by Lori, arrived to Meg. It was saying Mr. Brooke loved Meg deeply and wanted Meg to send a word to hope to him through Lori. After that, Meg replied it. She wrote that she was too young to do anything about love. When Mr. Brooke replied the letter by saying he never sent any love letter, Meg understood someone else, either Joe or Lori, wrote it and felt herself really awful, really awful. Joe supposed that Lori wrote the letters, both, and kept the ones written by Meg because she didn't tell him her secret. Mrs. March asked Joe to fetch Lori immediately. Joe went to the next house and she called Lori. Lori came. Meanwhile, Mrs. March told the real feelings of Mr. Brooke to Meg, and she said that he really loved you, and she asked her if she could wait or not until he earned enough money. Mr. Brooke was asking this. He wanted to know if she could wait, if Meg could wait, or not until he earned enough money. Meg didn't want anything to do with love for a long time because she thought that she was so little. She just wanted her mom to keep this event quiet, and her mom promised her to do this. When Lori came and saw Mrs. March's angry face, he understood the reason, because he had done something bad and he understood. Mrs. March talked to him alone. At that time, girls were waiting outside. That's why girls didn't know what was said. Lori apologized to Meg and informed her that Mr. Brooke knew nothing about either of the two letters. She said she didn't think he could be so kind. And she wasn't ready to forgive Laurie because she was so angry. How dare he could do it? It was a wicked one. That boy did something wicked. We went away looking hurt. He went away looking hurt and unhappy. Jo was also sorry for him. In fact, she was angry with him, but after that, she saw he was so sad, she forgave him straight away, but refused to look at him. And after that, after a while, Jo went to the big house because she wanted to see and she wanted to talk to him. And she hurried over to the big house, taking with her as an excuse one of Mr. Lawrence's books that she had borrowed, because she would say that I came here to give my book to Lawrence, to return my book, she would say. She saw the servant, and the servant told Jo Mr. Lawrence was arguing with Laurie. Oh, what happened? Jo went straight to Laurie's room and said she forgave him. After that, Laurie explained that he was shaken by his grandfather since he didn't tell the truth. So we understood that Mr. Lawrence asked Laurie what had happened, but in the room he promised Mrs. March not to tell anyone about this secret. That's why he couldn't say that secret. As he promised Mrs. March, he couldn't tell him what happened. After that, Mr. Lawrence got angry. Laurie wanted his grandfather to apologize to him, otherwise he wouldn't go down. After learning this, Jo tried to make a plan, make peace between them by talking to Mr. Lawrence. And she went to Mr. Lawrence's study. He confessed that he found it hard to be patient with him sometimes. He admitted what he had done to Lawrence. And Jo kindly asked him to write a note to Laurie, which was saying he was sorry, because Mr. Lawrence said that, okay, call him. And Jo said he wouldn't come, he couldn't come, please write a note for him. And all of the matters were ended because Mr. Lawrence wrote a note, and Jo brought that note to Laurie's door. All of them had finished. All of them had been forgotten. All of the matters were ended except the one between Meg and Laurie, because Meg couldn't forgive him, couldn't. Meg thought of Mr. Brooke very often, and she dreamed about him. At last, Jo found a bit of paper, Mrs. John Brooke written on it, over and over again. Okay, Mrs. Brooke. It shows that Meg began to love him, began to dream about him. It shows this. Okay, I hope you understood, my friend.